Welcome back. So I've finally gotten down to the sand part of this painting, and okay, here's the rule. Darks first, lights last. There are times when it's hard to follow that rule. This is one of those, because I'd rather paint the distant sand first and move forward, but if I do that, I'm going to be painting light sand color, getting darker. So it would be better to paint dark and go back, except that I don't really want to come down to this part of the painting. So one of those druthers, one of those inclinations I have to violate. Even though I've got the color mixed up to do what I wanted to do, I'm going to abandon that right now. And in fact, I am going to I thought that was I thought I had a pile of, this happens sometimes. Let me point you at my palette. I thought that I had a pile of ultramarine blue on my palette right here and pulled it out, and turns out it wasn't. It's some funky stuff that I don't know where I got it. It was ultramarine, Winsor Newton ultramarine blue, red shade, I think they called it, but it's extremely green. So you explain to me why it's called red shade when it's extremely green. So I'll just remember that that's what that is. I'm sure it's a fine color if you know what you're doing, but if you stick your brush in it and think it's one thing, then find out it's another. That is not a happy experience, which I just had right then. So now I'm putting out, by the way, how do you get the last little bit of paint? By the way, Two-bringer, fantastic tool, absolutely worth the price. Absolutely do not buy a plastic one, not worth the price. Okay, so spring for the expensive one. The plastic one is a lot cheaper and worth every darn lack of penny, if you know what I mean. So buy the metal one, and then use pliers to squeeze the end of the tube. Okay, while I'm putting colors out though, I just noticed I also need, I use a lot of yellow ochre, it appears, in my painting. This is the third time I put yellow ochre out on this palette. Now, I've got these brushes, or brush, I guess, contaminated with that awful green stuff. Again, I'm sure it's wonderful paint and a wonderful color, but not when you think it's something else. And that it's not wonderful then. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of red to that just to neutralize that greenish tint. So what I'm trying to mix up right now, forgive me, so I'm out of oxide red already. Let me get more oxide red. I know that I use a lot of that. I use the two colors that I go, the most volume that I go through the most are ultramarine blue and oxide red. Partly because I use that combination for so many things, like I'm doing right now. Let me mix up just a larger volume of that. So oxide red is a nice red-orange brown, and when you add ultramarine to it, it just dulls it down to a nice medium brown, which is, I think, what I want right now. Okay, now back to the painting, shall we? And forgive me while I jerk you all over the place. Okay, so I thought I was going to start up here, but I changed my mind. So I have a much darker paint on my brushes now than I thought I was going to use. I'm going to start down here. Now everything I do down here in this area of the painting plays second fiddle to everything that's up there, right? Supporting actor, not steal the show kind of shenanigans. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I keep everything down here fairly muted in color, fairly soft in edge as I soften that, and very slightly muted in contrast. I don't want a ton of contrast down here. That would be very counterproductive to my purposes. Yet at the same time, yes, I want some definition. I want it to look like a sand peeking through the slats of one of these ubiquitous sand fences. And an old sand fence, not a nice new one that's all straight, but an old one that's bent up and it's got staves missing and all kinds of stuff like that. Does that make sense? A new one bespeaks a very different kind of atmosphere than I'm trying to create with this painting. It doesn't fit what I'm trying to do at all. So I want it to be an old one. I've almost gone far enough this way with this color. I'm going to mix up a slightly lighter version of that now. Slightly lighter version of what I just used. A little bit lighter than I had intended, but let's see if I can just make it work. Okay, I need a nice, here we go, brush like this. One of the things, in my opinion, that is going to make this painting work or not work, as the case may be, is that this whole middle area here has to be very void of detail, void of interest. Its whole purpose is to be a large field of very flat color or subtle color. Okay? So I don't want a lot of anything happening in here. I don't want little ripples. I don't want sand crabs. I don't want stones and rocks and seaweed. None of that. In my opinion, that would be all counterproductive to this painting. So I'm accomplishing that with this fairly large cheap chip brush, and just stumbling in this sand area. Why don't I want attention here? Because the tension is here and a little bit here, and the painting works if there's nothing happening. I don't mean nothing, but if there's very little happening in between, I feel like. Now, there is underpainting, like there's a very pale, slight line. In fact, it's a pencil line we can barely see underneath, and I think that's quite pleasant, just as it is. But I don't want a lot more of that kind of thing. That would be overdoing it. And mixing up more of that pale sand color. My wife came in the door from errands and looked at my painting a little while ago. Said, "Ooh, I like it." But the one thing she didn't like so much, she said, "I wish the sand was more sand color and not so yellow." So, unbeknownst to her, this is exactly what I was going to do, although maybe her words have actually encouraged me a little bit, influenced me to make sure it's not too yellow. It's a pretty realistic sand color. This photograph is actually, I cranked the saturation in Photoshop to make this green, to make all these colors here. But, okay, so that might be done with that whole area. If I want to come back and add some detail later, I certainly can. But at the moment, I'm going to leave it right there. Back to my small brushes now, and trying to mix up an appropriate light sand color. And already I've got too much pigment, not enough white in that mixture, so more titanium white. Oh, by the way, I said I use more ultramarine and oxide red than anything. Well, except for titanium white, of course. In that respect, I'm a very traditional oil painter. Even though I use far less titanium white and opaque than most painters do, I still use more white than anything else. Wasting a lot of paint right now, just getting these brushes to a usable state of dryness, if you will. Okay. Now, back to sort of where I wanted to start out, which was the grass, the sand peeking around the grass up here. I feel like how I handle this is critical to the overall success of this painting. How I handle the marks that I make. This is a classic example of the nature of the marks that I'm making. The marks themselves is far more important than the realism, although, of course, I want it both ways. I want it to be realistic, but I want it to be realistic without rigor, which is a new word one of my students gave to me last night. Realism without rigor. Ooh boy, you could write an article or a book on that. Realism without rigor. I'm finding that happily that the yellow, the beige that I've got mixed up right now is actually a little bit too light, so it just add a little bit of brown to it. Transparent oxide, transparent yellow ochre, and yellow ochre, two different colors. There, that's a little bit darker, a little bit better. Every once in a while I should look at a photograph. Be reminded what this stuff actually looks like. Everybody, all human beings, in my opinion, except for those who've been truly brainwashed by the fine arts education establishment, the fine arts establishment in the Western world, except for those, everybody gets a kick out of seeing something accurately rendered by a human being. We all, when you go online and you type in photorealistic painting or hyper-realistic painting or drawing, and when you pull it up, everybody intuitively gets a kick, whether you admit it or not. You go, wow, that's cool. There's a little bit of a buzz we get from that, okay? So when you're painting, when in doubt, go real. When in doubt, go realistic. But better than realism, in my opinion, is when your realism is achieved through brushmanship, not through rigor, not through progressing to smaller and smaller and smaller brushes and proceeding to do a ton of tongue painting. Right? That kind of realism is not as pleasant as a realism that is achieved through brush panache, brush joy, brush play. So that I'm trying to come up with different words to describe not just me, but everybody from Rembrandt down to, I don't know who, Van Gogh. They picked two Dutchmen to make our bookmarks. One of my favorite painters is Frans Hals, H-A-L-S, another Dutch, Frans Hals. I never forget, some of the seminal moments you have as a young person stick with you the rest of your life. And I was with my art class in college at the Detroit Institute of Art, and they have a classic Frans Hals painting on display there. And that was the one of all the hundreds of paintings I saw that day. That was the one that stuck with me. From 6 feet away or 8 feet away, the painting looked photographic in its detail and realism. the lace collar on the shirt. I can't remember if it was a Laughing Cavalier or who, but it was something like his Laughing Cavalier, something like that, with a lot of, you know, whatever, Elizabethan, that's not the appropriate term if it's a Dutch person, I understand, but that era, you know, 1600s, 1700s, and a man wearing a lot of lace around his neck and around his sleeves, and the lace was just absolutely stunningly realistic from 6 or 8 feet. But when you got 2 or 3 feet away from it, the lace completely disappeared, and it turned into the most obvious little splotches of paint applied with it. I mean, you could see exactly how each stroke was applied. And that's a good example of what I'm talking about. Is we get a kick, we all get a kick out of something well rendered, but I think the main thrill we get out of painting is from realism achieved through brushmanship. And by that I don't mean, again, forgive me for acting out, but okay, here's a brush. Let me lick it so you can just see how small it is, right? This is not brushmanship. This is OCD, fastidiousness gone amok. I've done plenty of it, believe me. This is not skill. I've never said it this way. This is not skill. This is compensating for lack of skill. Somebody should write that down. This is not skillful painting. This is compensating for lack of skill. Okay? So when I say brushmanship or brush skills, that's precisely what I mean. You don't take that brush. You take a brush bigger than what you think you should use, and lay down marks that accidentally, in this case, that quote unquote accidentally look like little bits of bare sand peeking between the sand, between the grass. Get it? In my opinion, that is the best kind of painting. Now, having said that, if you follow me for long, I still enjoy every once in a while doing some OCD fastidious painting. It's fun. Realism is fun. For me, it's very much. I don't color me weird, whatever, but I enjoy jigsaw puzzles. Okay? Much of my family, several of my mom and dad and siblings, several of us enjoyed jigsaw puzzles. So maybe I inherited some of that. And for me, doing super realistic artwork is very much like doing a jigsaw puzzle. It takes a long time. Oh my goodness, sure. But it's relaxing. You just sit there and hum and put on a good podcast, put on some good music, and it's relaxing. My goodness, a day of realism is like a day at the beach. This, on the other hand, this kind of painting is in fact difficult because every stroke you have to think about. You can't turn off your brain and just copy stuff. Every stroke has a life of its own, and you can't just copy. You have to think. Okay, now I had some fences in here somewhere, and they've kind of all disappeared on me. Let me see if I can undisappear one of these, or 2 of these little sand fences. Again, so I'm not painting the fence, I'm painting between the fence. Right? Okay, and if you watch me often, you've heard me say this before. When you're painting and you have a repeated motif, that is to say you have an object or a shape that is repeated, classic. Many times in a architecture, it's the mullions in a window. You know, boom, 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 next window, next window, next window, next window. Anytime you have a repeated shape, a repeated motif, how do you must, if you want to paint well, you must render that motif in a variety of ways. Not over and over and over again the same way, but different ways. Okay, so let me demonstrate that. So I just did 2 stays. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm going to give it a try. And I'm taking my brush and painting like that. And then I'm going to take the handle. See, I don't know if it's going to work because what's underneath here is slightly wet. So I'm actually, not working too well because I'm scraping through the dark stuff to mid-tone underneath. So I'm going to have to do more to that to get it to work. But while we're on the subject, how do you render it? Through a number, not through 2. You render a repeated motif with a variety of strokes. I'm fishing around here for a palette knife of the right size. Okay, so I did 2 with a brush. I tried to scratch 2 out. It didn't work so well. Now I'm going to come in here and do a couple with a palette knife. Is anybody asking why? Why? Who says? Why? Who says? Okay, it's only, forgive me, it's only stupid painters who are saying, who says? Well, an experienced painter, if you're better than me, you can say who says, but anyway, never mind. I'm sounding defensive now, aren't I? I heard a great description the other day. I heard a great description of trolls on some podcast or some radio program. Trolls, which are among us all the time. And the commentator said, ignore them. That's some guy that's sleeping in his mom's basement on Star Wars sheets. Now, forgive me if I've just truly insulted any of my friends. But I thought, what a picture. You got it? A 40 or 35-year-old guy sleeping in his mom's basement on Star Wars sheets. That's who's doing most of the trolling in the world. And maybe I'm over optimistic. Maybe a lot of people are trolls. But that helped me to kind of say, okay, next time I get a nasty troll comment which we all do, of course, online, I'm just going to call up that picture. Okay, so here again, I'm rendering this sand fence with the 1, 2, 3, fourth different technique, fourth different approach to rendering a repeated motif. I'm way over here where I don't really want much. Sharpness. I'm actually going to take a fan brush, just smudge out everything I just did. Not everything, it's still there, but it's just smudged. Okay, let me rein it in a little bit. Come back to this part of the fence, and that's enough. That's enough of the palette knife stuff. Come back to painting with a brush now. Okay, but I hope you got that principle. Anytime. I mean, not many of you are going to be painting a sand fence in the near future. Anytime you stumble across a repeated pattern, a repeated motif, an object that's in your painting, there's a whole lot of them. Power lines are kind of like that. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different power lines in the sky here. And yes, they are all rendered, I mentioned that earlier, they're rendered in at least 3 different ways, if not 4. That's plenty of energy right there. I don't want any more. I'm asking myself, do I want another bit of fence over here? And I think I do, but it's even further away, so it has to be even more fuzzy and diffused, abstract than this one was. Happy children in the background, always a nice sound. Probably good enough right there. Let me just define this one last stave. Say that's where the fence ends. Tell people that's where the fence ends. And I think that's good enough. Yeah. And again, just a barest hint of one here. It's getting far enough away that it's hard to tell. Is that a fence or not? But I would like to suggest that it is. Suggest visually that, yes, that's what this is. Notice how I'm holding the brush. It's almost illegal to hold it that way, isn't it? Again, the name of the book is Breakable Laws of Painting. Never hold a brush that way. Oh, except for the times when you need to hold the brush that way. Got it, got it. Okay, I think I'm happy with that, with those fences. Let me put this outlet down and put this brush in over a way to get cleaned up later. I don't know why I've got a light dark area there. Okay, continuing now with sand in the distance, and what makes this work, if I'm being overly simplistic, is the underpainting showing through. These kinds of marks right here, applied too thickly, would kill the effect. It's the variety of shape, the variety of color and value and texture that keeps this from being monotonous and boring. Little tiny bit of blush of pinkish red in there. Where'd that come from? I have no idea. It happened somewhere in the underpainting stage. There's something happening here I'm not crazy about. Let me find a medium-sized brush. Here we go. This little bit of light is too much, too much. Smudge that out. Same thing here. Okay, I'll use that brush again later. I'm standing awfully close to this painting, and I'm painting awfully slowly. So I tell myself I'm in danger. I'm in real danger of fiddling this thing to death up here. So let me try to force myself to get a move on and paint more quickly here. Remember, I don't know if you were with me a couple of videos ago when I was doing this area up here, and I thought that maybe I had the right color sand, but now I say, nope, it's a little bit dark. So now we come back and lightening it, and it's working much better. Much better. Whew, good. Painting around the side of the painting. Paint the edges always so they don't have to frame. Reinforced light up there. Back to my big friend right here. Add a little bit of light right there. Okay, now here's a question. Do I want to add a little bit of horizontal? I feel like I do. I said I don't want much happening in here, and I don't, but I can use just a little bit, because horizontal lines in a landscape connote distance. If this is, well, first of all, so does the graduation from dark to light, but the horizontal lines do even more to give the suggestion of depth. And so I'm going to add just a tiny bit, and I think that's good enough. Okay? I think that unless I change my mind about something, like I'm about to do right here, I want to make this a bit of a fence too. I think that the painting's done down to here. So just about all I have left to do is that part of the painting. And I'm going to pause right there, come back in a little bit and finish. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you're enjoying this.